Today is Thursday, July 16, 2020, coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered. A recent op-ed in the Washington Post says that Senator Elizabeth Warren is the best choice for Joe Biden for black voters. We'll talk to the co-author of that piece, Angela Peoples. Senator Doug Jones is ready to face off with former football coach, Republican Tommy Tuberville, for that critical Senate seat in Alabama. Jones will join us right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered. 87 people were charged with felonies after a Brianna Taylor protest at the home of Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron, his home there in Louisville, Kentucky. We'll talk with activist Tamika Mallory, who was one of the folks arrested. A statue of a Black Lives Matter protester in Bristol, England, has been removed by the local authorities. We'll give you those details. And here in the United States, Georgia Senator Kelly Loeffler is running against the Black Lives Matter movement. by her own admission. Speaking of Georgia, Governor Brian Kemp overrides all mask orders in the state. We'll talk with the mayor of Savannah, Georgia, Van Johnson. Also, Democratic lawmakers demand action from the Health and Human Services Department on the coronavirus impact on minority communities. Plus, we'll continue our conversation today about Nick Cannon. He has apologized to Jewish leaders, and Fox has announced he will not be losing his job on The Masked Singer. Twitter accounts of prominent figures yesterday were hacked in what was the largest breach in the company's history. We'll talk with a data expert about that. Plus, today's crazy-ass white person. And speaking of crazy, wait until I tell you the drama dealing with Ebony magazine. Woo! It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the biz, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the fine. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, Rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
All right, Vice President Joe Biden still has not announced who is going to be his vice presidential running mate. Of course, he has secured the Democratic nomination for president. A number of people are on that list, including Senator Elizabeth Warren. Now, he's made it clear he's going to choose a woman to be his running mate. Folks also being vetted include California Senator Kamala Harris, Congresswoman Val Demings of Florida, former UN Ambassador Susan Rice, and others. Well, recently, in the Washington Post yesterday, a couple of African Americans published a column stating that the best choice for African Americans who will be standing up for Black lives is Senator Elizabeth Warren. The co-author of that piece is Angela Peoples. She is the director for Black Women For. She also wrote that piece for Philip Agnew, who is a co-founder of the Dream Defenders, who, of course, had worked on the Senator Bernie Sanders campaign. Angela, welcome to Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Thank you for having me, Roland. I'm happy to be here.
All right, so how do you make the case that several Black women who are being vetted, including Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms as well, that Senator Elizabeth Warren, a white woman, is better than them to be Joe Biden's VP choice? Why is she a better choice when it comes to Black lives?
Well, Roland, the case that we make and the thing I think voters and Vice President Biden need to consider is that we're in a moment right now where our country is on fire. And the fires seem to be ever starting up day after day, week after week, another crisis. And the bottom line, often the common denominator is that these crises we're seeing are disproportionately impacting and harming Black communities. But what is at root of them are the structural inequalities. And what folks are fighting for, not just for police reform, not just for calls for defunding the police, but for a real reckoning and transformative shifts across our society. And what we need right now for the Democratic ticket to win and to beat Trump in November is for folks to be enthusiastic, to be running to the polls or to be running to mail in their ballots, which may be the likely outcome. Given the virus, we need people to be extremely excited to go out and vote for a ticket that isn't just going to, in order to beat Trump, but that is going to bring about these big changes, these big structural shifts, and taking on the entrenched inequalities that folks are facing. And Elizabeth Warren, of the VP folks that are being considered, is the one that has the most impressive track record doing just that. And so, while I think that we talk in the op-ed about the power of representation and getting more Black folks in higher levels of office, but that representation right now is not going to be enough to get people out to the polls, to encourage people out to vote, and also then to win and to bring about the big changes, to respond to the depression that we're headed into, and to really push for the addressing the healthcare crisis, the climate crisis. Vice President Biden needs a vice president and a running mate that can bring that energy and that has a record of not just talking about big structural change, but making it happen. And I think that case is Senator Warren.
You lay out here, you says the piece that black communities around the country are responding to decades of policies and practices that constrain and destroy black lives: wealth stripping, redlining, school closures, poverty, wage jobs, voter suppression, and gentrification. Are those not issues that Senator Harris, that Congresswoman Val Demings, that Ambassador Susan Rice are not well versed on and haven't addressed?
So the piece that we wrote is not about any of the qualifications of the other candidates that are being lifted up. I think that there's a lot to say about the record of many of the women that are being considered to be vice president. But what we are saying is that of the folks that are being considered, Senator Warren has the track record of pushing for these issues and also getting things done. I think it's important. I would lift up the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau as one very maybe well-known but really critical example. The CFPB was able to fight and get $12 billion back from borrowers who were cheated by big banks and mortgage brokers, et cetera. But most significantly for the Black community, the CFPB and with Senator Warren's leadership has a specific win around discrimination and getting $620 million awarded against back to folks who were discriminated against on the basis of race or gender by these big banks. And so that's just one example in her history of not just talking that talk, not just proposing legislation, not just speaking on these issues, but actually taking on these hard fights, taking on Wall Street, taking on the special interests, and getting results for Black communities. Even before, back in 2015, before any candidates were saying, or any elected leaders were saying Black Lives Matters, and were speaking the language, white or Black folks, frankly, were speaking the calls that were coming from the streets after the murder of Michael Brown, after the murder of Sandra Bland. Senator Warren was out there saying Black Lives Matter, and it's not enough to say that Black Lives Matter. It has to be an anti-racist policy and anti-racist politics that shows up in our policies and in what we do. And I think that, again, it's not to say or to take away from the resume of any other folks that are being considered. The case that we're making is that of those that are considered, Senator Warren is the best and has the most strong and consistent and compelling record to do that.
Vice President Joe Biden, he lost Iowa. He lost New Hampshire, lost badly, came in second in Nevada. He wins South Carolina, and then he runs the table. It was Black voters who saved him in South Carolina. Black voters often say that they are diminished and dismissed by Democrats. I've always said that Black voters are tired of being political sharecroppers. What will it say, though, that the candidacy of Vice President Joe Biden was saved by Black voters, and there won't be, if he does what you and Philip suggest, that there won't be an African American on the ticket? Does he not owe Black America? Because without Black voters, he is not the nominee.
I think that is true. Joe Biden certainly owes his nomination to Black voters, Black primary voters in South Carolina and in other states around the country. I think one thing it's important to note is that primary voters are not the same as general election voters. Joe Biden is going to need a lot more energy and support from young voters, from progressive voters, from young voters of color who did not have strong support for him during the primary. And so he has won a lot of support from Black voters that showed up in those primary elections, but that's not going to be enough to get him over the finish line in November.
But here's the deal.
Particularly facing, just 1 second, Roland.
Go ahead.
Particularly facing the voter suppression that we know is already happening from the GOP. Now, and I will say that I think that Joe Biden certainly owes Black voters, but he owes Black voters more than just one Black person at the top of the ticket. He owes Black voters the canceling of student debt. He owes Black voters an economic recovery that is going to put our issues and our communities and our needs and at the center and challenge those special interests that are going to try to water it down, that are going to try to placate, that are going to try to get their own, move this recovery or any sort of massive legislation that might come out of it for their own pockets. He owes Black voters the transformation that we have been demanding for decades. And while I do understand that having a Black woman in a high office is one example of one symbol that shows change, it is not enough in this moment. And he owes Black voters much more than that.
You talked about young voters. You talked about the need to get those voters. Senator Elizabeth Warren didn't get those voters. In fact, she couldn't even win her home state against Joe Biden in Massachusetts. So the question is still, so what if when you talk about on the ticket and you're trying to get those young voters, but here's the other deal. There was a 2.4% decrease among Black voters in 2016. What will it say that on the Democratic side, you had Julian Castro, you had Kamala Harris, you had Cory Booker, who were running for president. Then, of course, now when you talk about being considered, you talk about Demings, Harris, Keisha Lance Bottoms, Susan Rice, those individuals, and then picking a 70-year-old white woman. Do optics matter? Now, look, their records are also there as well. But don't you also factor that in? Because the reality is, you look at where Hillary Clinton lost, decrease in Black voter turnout in Milwaukee, in Detroit, in Philadelphia, in North Carolina, across the country. If you don't have Black folks turn out in big numbers, you do not win against Donald Trump.
Correct. And I challenge the assumption, which is what I'm hearing in your statement, that a Black person on the ticket will automatically mean higher turnout for Black voters. I would challenge that assumption, and I think that
No. Actually, that wasn't my assumption. It wasn't my assumption. Hold on. Let me correct that. That wasn't my assumption. I raised the question because if by not choosing an African American, what that will do is unleash the criticism that here we go again. Black folks save the hide of white Democrats. Black politicians not rewarded for Black folks actually saving the hide. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there will be a number of criticisms unrolled. Right, this is an election. There will be a lot of conversations. The thing that I think that this op-ed is saying, and that I think voters and Vice President Biden need to consider, is what is actually going to not just get people out, but what is the team that Biden needs to build to actually get this country back on track? And the reality of what we're facing is that Senator Warren is of the candidates that are being considered. When you think about the role that even Vice President Biden played when he was in the beginning years of President Obama's administration, right? We were in a recession. We were in deep, sort of economic trouble. And Vice President Biden, as the vice president, took on that role. President Obama said, I want you to kind of spearhead the economic recovery plans. And Joe Biden did just that. Senator Warren is the exact candidate that we need to move us, or the leader that we need to be that vice president support for Vice President Biden if he is elected, to really spearhead that economic recovery. I can't think of anybody else that we would want to be in that leadership position.
But are you concerned?
The question that you're asking, just let me finish, Roland. The question that you're asking about optics, I think the optics did not did not come into play during the primary when voters didn't choose the Black or brown candidates that were on the ballot, right? Black voters chose the candidate that they thought was going to be the best chance to beat Donald Trump. And I think that is the same calculation that a lot of voters are making right now, and voters are hoping that Vice President Biden is also making, is also considering. And I believe that the right candidate to add value, to add enthusiasm, to add a voter base, to add excitement to this ticket is Senator Warren.
Are you concerned, though, that if he does pick Senator Warren and Biden wins, a Republican governor will choose her replacement? Democrats need to pick up 4 seats in the United States Senate in order to control the Senate. She's not up for re-election. If that happens, let's say they pick up those 4 seats, she's on the winning ticket, she becomes vice president, they now fall back and Republicans are in control of the United States Senate.
That's a number of what ifs.
No. Actually, no. Let's be real clear. Is that no? Hold on. One second. Again, if she is the nominee, and if Joe Biden wins in November, then she will obviously would have to resign her Senate seat, and then the Republican governor of Massachusetts gets to pick who replaces her. If the Democrats right now, Democrats are leading huge in Arizona, they're leading in Colorado, they're leading in Maine, which means now they're assuming they're going to lose Senator Doug Jones' seat. He's on the show next. He doesn't think so, but they are assuming that if they win North Carolina or the Montana seat or one of the 2 in Georgia or any of the contested races, they will control the Senate. If the governor of Massachusetts picks a Republican to replace her, Democrats now lose control of the Senate. Should that also factor into this decision?
Yeah. So that was about 5 ifs.
Actually, it's only three.
Okay, semantics. But I take your point, and I think that those are challenges that can be dealt with when we come to that moment. And if Senator Warren is the vice president, she will still have a role to play in the Senate. But Angela,
hold up, Angela. Here's the problem. If Biden wins and Republicans control the Senate, they can block whatever he and Warren wants to do. So don't you have to look at this thing as a 2-step by saying, I get your point, but if we win the Senate and we got to give up our Senate seat, he gets appointed Republican. If Mitch McConnell is now in charge, he blocks anything Biden wants. Don't you have to factor that in?
I think that is something to consider. And I think that the opportunity for the changes that would come, the power of a Biden-Warren administration actually wins it out. And the truth is, if Biden wins in any of the other many what if scenarios that you outlined don't happen, we're still in this similar place. Democrats are going to, and that's also why we need a candidate or someone like Senator Warren on the ticket, so that that she can help be a push down ballot for those Senate races where she's already been investing, has already been building, has already been pulling candidates around, right? That's why you need a candidate like Senator Warren on the ticket that can add more value to and show up and rally for those candidates, to raise more money for the Senate candidates, to raise more money, frankly, for the House candidates, so that there's even more strong, progressive, pro-Black voices in the House, and that we actually can win the Senate, right? And so, yes, that fact that the reality of losing one Senate seat does need to be considered, but the reality of having a dynamic force like Senator Elizabeth Warren, that we've already seen her ability to raise money for other candidates, and how her endorsing candidates raises their profile and helps them win and helps elevate them. So that's another factor to consider, among other things, and among the many what ifs that are at play here in this very wild year of 2020.
My panel is Erica Savage Wilson, host Savage Politics Podcast, Dr. Greg Carr, Chair, Department of Afro-American Studies, Howard University, Reese Colbert, Black Women's Views. I'll start off with Erica Savage Wilson. Your question for Angela Peoples.
Sure. So good to be with you, Angela. So I kind of have a couple of questions. This op-ed comes on the heels of 5 Black women that wrote an op-ed specifically saying that candidate Biden needs to choose a Black woman. How do you square with what Roland talked about, that last piece, when this election is not just about firing Trump, but it is about all those specific factors that do impact Black, brown, all voters and voters of colors? How do you square saying that a candidate who is in fact a white woman, but did manage to matriculate through many institutions, writing down that she was an American Indian, not Native American, but American Indian? How do you square with voters to say that the largest and most vocal voice for Black liberation would be that of a white woman?
That's not what I was stating, but I do. So I'm not quite sure on the question that you're asking. Could you clarify?
Sure. So I'm asking, on the heels of an op-ed where there were a group of Black women that specifically wrote that it is of the essence that candidate Biden does make sure that he does partner and has a Black woman as vice president. How do you square with the piece that you and Philip wrote to say essentially that the person that will be arguing the loudest for Black liberation, which was throughout your piece, would be a white woman who has claimed throughout her matriculation through several institutions that she was American Indian? How do you square that with the piece that you wrote?
Well, I think that this is something that I've been saying throughout the primary, that, Black voters are not a monolith, right? We have lots of different perspectives, and that's the diversity and the beauty of our community. And so while I'm not familiar with all of the women in the op-ed that you're naming, I think that their opinions and their perspectives are certainly valid and should be considered. My perspective and what I'm lifting up is that, yes, representation and identity matters, but values matter much more, especially in this moment when we as a country and as a culture are really having some deep conversations about the entrenched elements of white supremacy, of capitalist exploitation, of corporate dominance, how all of those things are really coming together to disproportionately impact Black communities. I think we really have to look at a candidate's values and how those values have been backed up in their record in the public sphere, how they've shown up and who they've been interacting with and engaging and deeply engaging with. And from that perspective, I think that far and away the best choice in terms of the values that are aligning with the world that many folks in the movement for Black lives and across Black movements for liberation have been fighting for right now in this moment. The best candidate to bring about those changes is Senator Elizabeth Warren. And again, people have different perspectives, and I appreciate that. That's a part of the beauty of our community.
Reese Colbert.
Hi, Angela. I just have a couple of questions because you just brought up values and record. So I just want to highlight some things that are part of Senator Elizabeth Warren's record. In 2019, when she was running for president, she had 24% of her staff was Black. But now after the election, this is data that's published by the Senate Democrats, that number has dropped down to 16%. So that's a 30% decrease in her Black staff. That to me is not indicative of a person who's going to continue to champion, as you put it in the article, Black leadership. In fact, her Black chief of staff is no longer her chief of staff. She was replaced with a white man. That supposedly is voluntary. Okay, that's fine. But I still think a 30% drop in your Black staff is pretty large, considering that we didn't see that kind of drop off in other people. A question
about your question. Is that 30% drop also, did you calculate the actual percent drop in her number of staff? When you run for president, your staff's significantly bigger than your staff when you have a Senate office. So I'm just curious. I hadn't seen those numbers. So I'm curious if the numbers, that 30% drop was also reflected in the 30% drop in her actual number of staff members.
Okay, so let me clarify. In terms of the Senate Democrats' report card, they state that they have the percentage of her staff in terms of her total staff. So her total, if you go from 2018, before she was running, she had 20% Black staff. It went up to 24% in 2019. In 2020, it was down to 16%. So it's measured against her staff. completely. Okay, so that to me is a trend that's in the wrong direction for somebody who's going to champion Black lives. When she was running, when she was asked about the order of the primaries, as Roland pointed out, Iowa was first, New Hampshire is first. Those are very white states. When it came to South Carolina, that's a more diverse state. She was actually asked by a white woman about this, and if that's fair and if that should be changed. She said she's just a player in the game. When it comes to super PACs, she went on the entire campaign about how she doesn't take PAC money. And then as her campaign neared its end, she changed her idea and she decided to welcome super PAC money. And in fact, one person donated $14 million out of $15 million to her super PAC. So I see an inconsistency in her values. And I certainly don't see, when you look at the actual data, a person who has championed Black people and Black leadership. So I would just like to understand, how is it that she's going to champion Black people if she doesn't even champion Black staff?
So I don't want to do this here. I need Andrew to respond. Let's keep it tight. I got to get to Greg, and then I got to get to Senator Doug Jones, who's on hold. So Angela, go ahead and respond to Reese's question, then Greg Carr's next.
Yeah, I can't speak to the numbers. The way that you articulated the stats sounds, I'd like to see those numbers to quite understand the point that you were making is a little bit unclear. But I will say, in terms of the Black staff, one of the things that I was most proud of and impressed by when I was volunteering as a campaign surrogate for Senator Warren's presidential campaign was the treatment, the engagement, the support, and the input of her Black staff, and the way that she herself as a candidate listened to, engaged with, and took in the feedback of that staff, and even from leadership and her ability to support Black leaders outside of her organization, outside of her own campaign staff, right? And so her support of Black candidates that were running down the ballot, like Tamika Devine in South Carolina, or even Black community leaders, right? There's a plethora of examples that I could give you of Black folks that have been both uplifted from behind the scenes by Senator Warren, and that are continuing to kind of advise her and support her growing engagement on our issues.
Greg Carr, your question.
Yeah, thank you, Roland. Thank you, Angela, for your work and also for this provocative op-ed. We all know Joe Biden wouldn't be the nominee if the nominee was based on who had the best platform and best strategy. We also know that if he doesn't pick Warren, it will be because of the demographic calculus. He's trying to win the election. So let me ask you, if Warren is not selected as vice president, would you like to see her in a Biden cabinet, perhaps in the role of attorney general?
And please keep the answer tight, because I got to go to Senator Doug Jones. Angela, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that I think that Senator Warren is an important leader. She's an important voice. She is going to be critical if we're going to be able to get out of this recession and actually move forward with this challenging institutional racism in our country. And so I hope that that Vice President Biden does continue to follow her lead and to support, to engage with her and her supporters.
All right, Angela Peoples, we surely appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Angela, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Roland.
All right, appreciate it. Folks, Jeff Sessions lost his bid to reclaim his Senate seat to Republican and Trump-backed candidate, former football coach Tommy Tuberville. In November, the battle will be between Democratic Senator Doug Jones and Tuberville, who previously coached at Auburn, Texas Tech, Clemson as well. Joining us right now is Senator Doug Jones of Alabama. Senator Jones, glad to have you back.
Good to see you, Roland. Take care. I hope everything is safe and healthy with you. You and your family.
Indeed, indeed. You've got Democrats who are saying your seat is a lost cause. They're saying that, look, Republicans are going to win this seat. You barely won in a special election. Howard Dean, though, tweeted yesterday that current polling data shows you tied with Tommy Tuberville at 46%. What do you say to those Democrats who say it's a waste of money and time and effort to rally people to vote for you because Republicans are simply going to win it? Trump will win, Alabama running away.
I say two things. First of all, they're wrong. They were wrong in 2017. They're wrong again. We know the numbers. We've been doing the work. You know, Roland, Democrats have written off the South for far too long. And we've never been given a chance. But I think, in Alabama, we hadn't had a Democrat run for the Senate that had any financing with him for a long, long time. I mean, literally for a long, long time. First Democrat that we ran statewide with a platform was me with resources to win an election, and our message got out, and we won that election. Now, I know that the theories about flawed candidates, but the fact of the matter is we got a message that resonates with people. It's about working folks. It's about healthcare. It's about jobs. It's about economy. But right now, it's also about leadership in the midst of a crisis. Tommy Tuberville doesn't offer anything other than being Donald Trump's guy. Whatever Donald Trump wants, that's what he's running on. I'm running because I've got the people of Alabama's back, and people need to pay attention to that. Second of all, and this is really important, it really disturbs me that Democrats consistently just, if you want to write somebody off, they just write them off and they move on. That's why we don't have a bench of strength in the South that we're trying to grow. We've got to make investments in the South and across this country with Democrats that are willing to stand up, speak out, be Democrats, and put forth a message that people can resonate with. That's the only way we're going to win elections. We're not going to win it by people who just are simply walking up to a slot machine and trying to play the odds or the craps tables or something. We've got to make investments in the South and in Alabama. And fortunately, I've got more people that want to make those investments and want to help and believe in our candidacy than we've got people who are just writing us off. That's why we're going to win the race in 2020.
When you talk about those investments, at the end of the day, it's turnout. You got to mobilize, organize, register folks, and get them to the polls. Right. There are a significant number of people. When you and I were together, we were the Black Journalists with a board meeting in Alabama. It was in December. You told me an astronomical number of unregistered folks in Alabama, and a significant number of black folks in Alabama, home of Bloody Sunday, the Voting Rights Act.
Right. Yeah. Now, wait a minute. Hangy, you misspoke a little bit. It's not that they're unregistered. We got a fair amount of those. What we've got is a significant number of registered voters who have never cast a ballot. I mean, we're talking 400,000 or 500,000 African-American voters who have never cast a ballot, even though they've been part of the movement that we registered. So I think the challenge we've got, Roland, is to not only register young people and get people back on the polls, on the rolls that have been purged. We've got to get people engaged to get out to vote. That's where I think I've got this advantage. People in Alabama before 2017 just did not think that their vote mattered. I'm exhibit number one of every vote counts and your vote matters. And so it's that engagement that we're working on. We've been working on it for 2.5 years since I got there. We're going to continue to work on it in November.
You're running against a guy who's, his qualification, he was a football coach.
Well, look, I don't think we want to put it that way. I think the bigger problem is that he really doesn't have a clue about how to lead in the world of politics. He doesn't have a real clue for just about simple things like the Constitution and the checks and balances that the Senate and the members of the House are supposed to have on the administration. He has literally said that he moved to Alabama about 18 months ago because he believed that God sent Donald Trump to America to save America. And he moved to Alabama because he thought that that was the best opportunity to get elected to help Donald Trump. Not the people of Alabama, but to help Donald Trump. So we've got a lot of things. He said early on, and then we just issued a press release on this. Our governor issued a mask order, a statewide mask order yesterday, Republican governor, and I applauded her for doing it. It's something that's badly needed. Early in this pandemic, Tommy Tuberville, when asked what he would do about this healthcare crisis, he said, literally, I don't have a clue. Well, yesterday, he started undermining the mask order, saying that the government should not be doing that. For whatever reason, the government shouldn't be telling people what to do. So I think it's just the inexperience, and also I think he's not prepared at all for the role of a United States Senator.
When you talk about, when you talk about those people, how do you reach those people? Those are huge numbers. That's the difference between winning and losing. How do you convey to them why they should support you in November?
Well, because I've got their back. We've been reaching those people, Roland, for the last 2.5 years. Make no mistake, we've got a strong Democratic solid base in Alabama that we have also been reaching out to. We've done things on maternal and infant mortality. We've done things on civil rights and voting rights. I've spoken out about Black Lives Matter. We read Dr. King's letter on the Birmingham jail. My base knows that I'm there for them, but we've also been reaching out to people all over the state. We've done things for veterans, for farmers, for teachers, for educators, for healthcare workers, for first responders. We've done things for all over the state, and that is, we've been reaching out to those folks for the last 2.5 years, listening to them, talking to them, listening to them, helping them with the issues that they've got that they face every day. That's how we get through to those folks. Those folks know and understand, or at least there will be enough of them that I believe know and understand that they want a senator that's from Alabama, that's got their back, and no one else's. And that's what I've been able to do in the last 2.5 years.
All right, let's go to my panel. First off, Greg Carr, your question.
Senator, thank you. I wish we had time for me to ask you what you think about the death of Thomas Blanton Jr., since you helped send him to jail, thank God. But I want to ask you about this race against Tuberville in this sense. Tuberville really didn't have a declared political affiliation until late. When he was at Ole Miss, he said they need to take down the Confederate flag. It's killing us in recruiting. Would your strategy in this campaign be to force him farther right into Trumpism, or to maybe attempt to tack toward his Trump light kind of attempt? I mean, in other words, how do you plan to define a guy with no definition who's only got some things like a hedge fund mess up and some kind of wavering politically? How are you going to slug Tuberville in terms of trying to get him to define himself, or for you to define him coming forward?
Greg, he's already defined himself. He defined himself by simply saying, essentially, I will do whatever Donald Trump asked me to do. Now, regardless of, I guess, whether Donald Trump is president or not, that has defined him. He has defined himself. He has not spoken about any issues. He has not talked about anything that people face at their kitchen tables. All he has talked about is to drain the swamp, no amnesty, build a wall. He has defined himself. So I don't think we really have to do that. What we've got to contrast is my record in the United States Senate and my record in my career as a lawyer and as a prosecutor, my record in the Senate going forward versus what he has done in the past. All of those things are fair game. And it's interesting you bring up the Confederate battle flag because, think about that. He didn't want to remove the Confederate battle flag for the right reasons. He just wanted an advantage in recruiting, or not to get a disadvantage, which the battle flag got gone, which is a good thing. But think about that. And so he's been really quiet about all of that controversy right now. So we're not going to let him move. We're going to build that wall between him right now so he can't jump back over it.
Yes, Erica.
Yeah, thank you so much, Senator Jones, for being with us today. So my question is that Tommy Tuberville is a birther. He is also a person that, as of 2019, was repeating some of the same candidate Trump at the time lines about folks that were coming into the country, about them bringing drugs and bringing disease. So connecting all of that to the win of your campaign was largely because of Black women who organized and who did mobilize. What direct messaging are you providing to those 400,000 or 500,000 people who have not yet cast a ballot, when in the state of Alabama you have Black mayors like in Montgomery, Mayor Reed, in Birmingham, Mayor Woodfin, that are in those offices for major cities? What is your strategy? How are you communicating with those particular voters who, when you think about the numbers of people that reside in Birmingham and Montgomery, come close to that number? How are you communicating directly with those voters to get them to a place where they're actually casting a ballot in this COVID environment?
Well, I think the latter part of that is the challenge. Now, clearly we are reaching out on social media. We're reaching out in telephone town halls. We're reaching out in every phone call we can. We're getting the churches engaged. We're getting community leaders engaged. So we've got a ton of surrogates, and we're going to have to rely on a lot more surrogates this year than we did in 2017 because I was traveling all over the state, and some folks would go with me. We're going to have to rely on a lot more of that, I think, coming up in 2020. And they're there. They want to help. They're trying to do that. I think the challenge is what you just said. Alabama is a state where it's very difficult to cast an absentee ballot. Now, there's some lawsuits pending that I hope will get some relief for that. But if we don't, it's going to be a challenge making sure people feel safe and healthy, or either trying to get that absentee ballot to them. This is all, I'm just candid about this. It's a work in progress because you really can't judge from a very low turnout race that occurred this week. But as we go forward, we've got city and county races across the state. They're going to be coming up in August. So we're going to be watching that and monitoring the polling places to see where that goes. And then we're going to start kicking into high gear to reaching out to folks. But it is the excitement. And I think every day that this pandemic hits, when we see the leadership from Randall Woodfin, from Stephen Reed and those mayors and others and those local officials taking the lead, who are then going to end up being surrogates for Doug Jones, I think that is going to be a major way that we're going to get the enthusiasm out there. And the challenge will be just the logistics of getting those ballots cast.
Last question, Reese Colbert.
Hi, Senator. Thank you for being here tonight. I'm curious, how much do you think that your race is going to be more of a referendum on Donald Trump as opposed to your opponent? And if it is a referendum on Trump in basically Trump country, do you think that will work towards your advantage or work against you?
That's hard to say. I don't really know if my race will be defined by Donald Trump. We don't know that yet. Right now, I think his numbers are down everywhere, including Alabama. I think people are looking for leadership. But Alabama's got a fairly independent streak. I don't think you can really look at the past few presidential elections. Our Democratic Party has just not competed in the last 20 years in many, many races at all. And so I think now that we have worked to get new leadership, we've got the first African-American as the chairman of the Alabama Democratic Party, Chris England. I think that what we're going to see is that people are going to get that independent streak back. And again, Tommy Tuberville has just simply said, I'm going to be the one that has the president's back or Donald Trump's back. And I have been going around this state even before Tuberville moved to Alabama to run for the Senate, telling people of all walks of life in every zip code saying, I've got your back. Let's talk. I think that that's really what's going to carry the day. Even people that may vote for Donald Trump are going to be a little uncomfortable with his tweets. They're going to be uncomfortable with some of the leadership that they've not seen during this crisis. And they're going to want somebody, not just completely as a check, but they want somebody that's got their back, that's going to do those things for them that they know is appropriate, even if the president is not doing it on a national level.
All right, Senator Doug Jones, always a pleasure. Look forward to having you back before the campaign. Hopefully, if things open up, which I doubt, part of our deal was to do one of our shows down in Alabama.
Right.
But we'll hopefully see what happens. But certainly look forward to having you back.
Thanks, Roland. Appreciate it. Good to talk to you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, folks, Senator Doug Jones of Alabama. All right, got to take a real quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk with Tamika Mallory. She was one of the people who got arrested yesterday for protesting on the front lawn of the Kentucky Attorney General. They want him to do something, anything, when it comes to the death of Breonna Taylor. Also, we'll talk about the drama at Ebony magazine. Y'all, we got so much stuff to talk about. It's unbelievable. Trust me, y'all don't want to go anywhere. Let everybody know they must be tuning in to Roland Martin Unfiltered, because there's nobody having the kind of conversations that we're having every single day that's speaking to you as African Americans. We'll be right back. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. All right, folks, 87 people were arrested and charged with a felony after a protest on the lawn of Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron. This was the protest.
He is ashamed. I told him, shame on him, brother, because if he didn't have that on, they do the same thing to him. Brianna Taylor! Brianna Taylor! Who's telling me? Brianna Taylor! Brianna Taylor! Brianna Taylor! Of the black community? Brianna Taylor! Brianna Taylor! Brianna Taylor! Brianna Taylor! Find another position. You need to find a
over this way. Hey, those who are on the street, hey, can y'all hear me?
Now, of course, they're protesting to demand that charges be filed against the officers responsible for the March shooting death of Taylor. Joining me now is Tamika Mallory, co-founder of Until Freedom, one of the folks who organized that protest, who herself was also arrested. Tamika, glad to have you here. Was the Attorney General home? Was that his? Was he there?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Roland. This is a brand new home that the Attorney General purchased very, very recently, I think around June 26th with his new fiance. And per neighbors, he has not even moved into the home. Why
Do the protest at his home on his lawn? Folks will say, no, don't go to someone's home, go to their office, but you shouldn't go to someone's home. What do you say?
Well, we've tried all of that. We've been everywhere. We've been to his office. We went just 2 weeks ago, or maybe almost 3 weeks now, down to Frankfurt, which is the state capital. People have been protesting on the streets of Louisville for the last 46 days, and there has been no movement in this case. He just continuously says that he will not be rushed. And also, let's not act like this is a new method or this is some, new move that we created. In fact, people have been protesting outside of Mitch McConnell's house, who happens to be his homeboy, the senator here, for the last few months, in fact, and specifically around the death of Breonna Taylor, but for many other reasons. Also, the mayor's home, people have been protesting there. And we just saw that the governor of Kentucky, there was a protest at his house against the COVID-19 restrictions, where white folks hung a dummy body from a tree. So they lynched a dummy body and had a photo of the governor's face on the body. And they, not only were they not charged with felonies, they weren't arrested at all. So this is something that is being done specifically to people who are protesting for Breonna Taylor, that are black and brown folks, and of course some white folks, to cause a level of fear and intimidation. And the actual statute that they use was intimidating a witness and basically like we're trying to intimidate and force Daniel Cameron by intimidation tactics to indict these officers, when in fact the real intimidation is against the protesters by giving us the type of stipulation that is used for domestic violence victims. That law actually protects domestic violence victims. And if you saw from the ACLU to other experts and legal professionals in this town and across the country, they said, why would you dumb down a law that is so important to, to issue it against us peaceful protesters?
This was his quote: "Justice is not achieved by trespassing on private property."
Well, justice is also not achieved by sitting around begging for it, because clearly he hasn't done anything about the murder of Breonna Taylor.
Greg Carr, your question for Tamika Mallory.
Thank you, Sister Tamika. It's good to see you as always. Just reading that this young cat, Daniel Cameron, just asked a Kentucky state judge to block the governor's orders enforcing any COVID-19 restrictions in the state. Your best thinking on what may or may not be going through the mind of this Republican operative who's the Attorney General. I mean, what do you think it will take to move him?
Well, first of all, he's not just an operative, a Republican operative. He's also one of Trump's homies. And there's a big difference. You know, there's some Republicans out here who understand this COVID crisis. And they are saying, you know, while they want to make sure they keep the stipulations sort of loose, they know, especially I saw the Republican mayor, I think in Miami, said, no, we've got to have some restrictions here. People need to wear their masks. So this guy has committed publicly to being one of Trump's cronies and to ensuring that the state of Kentucky be Trump land. These are his words. So I think that's one part of it. But when we talk about moving people, we can't forget about the movement of the 60s and movements of many, many years where people said it won't happen. They'll never do it. But the consistency and the willingness to sacrifice for protesters and people who have a righteous movement has always moved those who were seemingly unmovable. And I think it's our responsibility to stay creative, to stay consistent, and to not be intimidated into inaction because they try to throw these types of charges at us. We will fight. We will fight until the end. I was thinking today, actually, Linda Sarsour and I, who's sitting over here saying hi to you, Roland, we were saying Angela Davis is a convicted felon. Nelson Mandela was a convicted felon. So was Dr. King. And so for us personally, we expect that in our lifetimes, they will try this. Hopefully, of course, it is thrown out because we can see from a legal perspective how it should be thrown out as a charge. But we expect that they will try these things with us. What we are concerned about is the families, the women, the principals, the teachers, and others who were there, who are righteous protesters again, that are receiving these trumped-up charges because they just can't bring themselves to charge the 4 men responsible for killing Breonna Taylor.
Erica.
Hi, Tamika, and thank you so much for your breathless work that you continue to do on behalf of all of us. Thank you so much, sister. Appreciate you. So my question for you, Ms. Mallory, is this Attorney General who is kinfolk, but not necessarily kinfolk, who has definitely made his alignments very, very clear that though he took the oath of office as Attorney General, flanked by Black women, that he's not for demanding the protection and justice for Black women. What is it that we can do in connection with your organization Until Freedom to help keep our foot on the gas for those folks who cannot be present in the movement per se? How can we help to fuel to ensure that we do, in fact, get justice for Breonna Taylor?
But, I think that the consistency piece is really important because what they're hoping, Erica, is that we will eventually get tired and go away, that they will charge us and also keep people locked up for over 20 hours, which is something that we never see happen. I mean, unfortunately, we've been arrested too many times. And in all the different states, all the different cities, We've never seen people who, in that footage that you watched, that Roland just played, were singing "We Shall Overcome," sitting on the grass in a uniform status. We even saw where a neighbor came forward. She's actually writing all over social media that we were very organized protesters who came by her home. She was standing outside. We explained to her why we were there, cleaned up the trash before people left, and they want to criminalize that. But I think that from our perspective, what is really important is that every time there's an action, we all must play whatever role we have, whether that's sharing a meme, because that's all you are able to do. Maybe you can't get there. Whether that is donating to the emergency fund. I heard someone say, well, you guys were let out on your own recognizances. There was no bail. And so, why do you have to raise bail funds? Well, you don't find out, Roland, that there's no bail until you're sitting in the jail. You're in the cell when you find out whether or not there's going to be bail. So you can't wait until that time to raise funds. And also our work is ongoing, not just here in Kentucky, but across the country. But also there's going to be legal fees. We cannot allow 87 people who, again, are family folks to have to go and find money to get back to court. We're supposed to be back in court in October to cover their legal fees. We can't allow that. So we have to provide those resources for these folks. And they're now our family, and we have to take care of them. People's cards were told. There were a lot of things that happened. And so that's what that emergency fund is about. We ask folks to go to untilfreedom.com. That's untilfreedom.com to help and support our work.
Reese.
Tamika, I echo what Erica said. Thank you so much for the incredible work that you do, the tireless work that you do. I noticed that not everybody was charged with the same charges. I've seen in other cases where there would be a Black person and a white person doing the exact same thing and have drastically different charges applied to them. Did you see any kind of racial bias in the way that the protesters were charged? Is that a concern of yours, or was it more so targeting people like you and Portia Williams and Andy Smith, who have a larger profile than others?
So here in Louisville, we have heard that several times. There have been protests where a white and Black person are doing the same thing. They're involved in the same protest, and the white person is charged of a lesser, receives lesser charges, and the Black person receives felonies and other things like that. In our situation, most people, when you said that some folks were not charged with the same, we're not given the same charges. I don't know who those people are. I'm not saying it's not true, because I certainly haven't seen all the citations. In fact, we weren't even physically given citations. But the majority of us received the same exact charges. And so I can't say that in this case they separated in any way. But what I will say is that when you are working with us, unfortunately, Linda and Tamika, we like it rough. So they come for us. They go hard when it comes to us. So if you're working with us, they're going to hit you with everything they can, because, again, they want to find a way to take us down. We're bringing so much to this movement in terms of our celebrity friends, being able to move young people, being able to move the streets, with my son and others, Trey the Truth, and Kenny Stills, the NFL player, Corday, attorney Angelo Pinto. These are people who work with folks on the ground, and we're actually able to engage all of these different folks into this movement. And so that is something that these people don't like, because they want one particular group of people out there. And around the issue of Breonna Taylor, what they would like to see is that her name sort of slips out of the media. We know how with Black women, it takes a lot to keep the attention on Black women, to be able to keep Black women trending when we are killed by police and when we're killed in general. And so what we're doing right now is keeping Brianna Taylor's name alive, keeping her family out there. And we want people to support making sure that continues to happen. And listen, if you're in your local town, turn up there too. Hold protests for Breonna Taylor. Find other women who may have been killed in police violence situations, and make sure that you link Breonna Taylor to those individuals like the Sandra Blands and the Tatiana Jeffersons and Rakia Boyd. Let's make sure this is not just a local issue for Louisville, but that this is a national issue, even an international issue, as I know, Roland, you have people watching from all over the world.
Absolutely, folks. Again, untilfreedom.com. And y'all keep in mind, this was a staple during the civil rights movement. Dr. King, they also understood that his attorney, Clarence Jones, was the one who was responsible for making sure there was bail money, bailing folks out. So this ain't nothing new. This is what has always happened. That's why right. We have to fund the movement. Just like I keep telling y'all, why we need y'all to help fund this show as well. You can't just keep expecting everybody else to fight for your freedom if you don't fund your own freedom as well. So go to untilfreedom.com. Tamika, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Roland. We just said, Linda and I, that we're going to become, from Until Freedom, monthly donors to Roland Martin Unfiltered, because it's important that there's someone who looks like us, who cares about our issues, to give us the platform as you are providing today, so that we can explain and tell our stories for ourselves. And so going forward, every month you can expect to see a donation directly from Until Freedom.
Well, we certainly appreciate it. And again, for all y'all folks who were not paying attention, go to our YouTube channel. Tamika called me about midnight. We live streamed that march in protest on our platform, which is why you have to have Black-owned platforms. MSNBC wasn't there. CNN wasn't there. The rest of the folks were not there. That's why we got to control our own narrative. And so, Tamika, always got your back. We appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Love to you. Bye-bye.
All right, folks. Now, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp is prohibiting cities across the state from requiring masks to be worn in public to alleviate the spread of the coronavirus. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm confused. Okay, I thought Republicans believed in local control. This executive order literally prevents local governments from enforcing mandatory face covering orders. Now, instead of imposing a mandatory requirement, Kemp's order states that residents and visitors in the state are, quote, strongly encouraged to wear face coverings as practicable when in public, except when eating, drinking, or exercising outdoors. Yet the head of the CDC, which is located in Georgia, has said if we can get all Americans to wear masks, we could have this under control in the next 2 months. Savannah Mayor Van Johnson joins me right now. Mayor, this is stupid. How here you are, the mayor of a city trying to protect residents, and the governor says, oh, the hell with that. I'm going to supersede what you have ordered, and I'm going to strongly encourage them to wear masks. This is absolutely dumb.
You've said everything that I've been thinking, everything I've been saying, and I go a step further. Now he's suing the mayor of Atlanta for her stand on trying to take care of the people of Atlanta.
He's suing her? He's suing her?
Oh, yeah. Breaking news. The fact of the matter is this, is that we've been trying in Georgia to do the very best we can to be able to protect our folks. We know that this has affected people across the board, but some people it affects more. And certainly those that are Black and brown are bothered more, and they're handled differently than everyone else. Cities like Savannah, Atlanta, Augusta, Athens, we put in mask ordinances to be able to protect our people. The science has been very, very clear. We know that masks, we know the social distancing, and we know that washing hands helps stop the spread of this virus. So you have Florida, which is about 120 miles from us. Again, that's the hotspot of the nation. Alabama has now required masks. And then South Carolina, to our north, allows local municipalities to decide. And then here in Georgia, not only we don't have the right to decide, we have our governor to specifically say that cities and counties who are the closest to the people cannot decide for ourselves. We've been fighting coronavirus with one hand, and we've been fighting our own state with the other. I don't
get these people these idiots who are running around saying masks don't work. They absolutely work. Yet, freedom. Well, guess what? You got the freedom to die as well.
That's right. And I have the freedom to live. And we know that actually wearing masks promotes freedom. As an alternative to cities closing down, businesses closing down, masks allow people to go to and fro, go into the businesses they love and enjoy, and be able to enjoy themselves in the midst of what we're going through. To just think that we don't have masks, and again, the federal government has been very clear throughout. The CDC, which is in Atlanta, has recommended that mask wearing is certainly the way to go, except in Georgia.
Erica, you're a native of Georgia. This is the most idiotic thing. This happened in Texas, where Governor Greg Abbott overruled Judge Eric Moyer, who was going to send his white woman to jail because she didn't want to close her store, her hair shop. And then he said, "No, this is unfair." Fox News lauded Greg Abbott in Texas. Now he's talking about they might have to shut the entire state down.
That's correct.
And now he's saying, "Oh, by the way, y'all need to wear masks." Erica, this what Kemp is doing. Brian Kemp is trying to kill people.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The GOP is a death cult. That was something that was on Twitter very, very recently. And just to really kind of confirm that this really is about not securing the safety of Black and brown folks, since we are the lion's share that's disproportionately impacted by COVID. Looking at Georgia, which was one of the first states to rescind those stay-at-home orders and open up businesses, and I believe it was as early as April. But
April
still, on the heels of what the mayor just shared with us in Savannah, that this governor is suing a mayor who has COVID-19. She and her family are recovering from that, Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms. He's doing that while the governor's mansion is still closed for public tours. So when you square that and you try to make it make sense, what you understand is that this person who was effective at ensuring that data from voter base from the time that he was Secretary of State was definitely released, that he definitely ensured that people were disengaged by actively suppressing the vote from his time in office as Secretary of State, and that he essentially stole that seat. I still refer to him as the former Secretary of State. He's not the legal governor. This is more par for the course. And so my question, Mayor, will be to you is that how are you directing folks in the beautiful city of Savannah to really be about what Roland just pointed out, the business of wearing masks, which health experts have said does reduce coronavirus transmission in upwards 40-50%.
Well, as for me in my house, as for me in the city of Savannah, Georgia, our mask, our emergency declaration is in play. It remains in place. Nothing has changed here. We are dedicated. We're hell-bent, if you will, to make sure that we're protecting our citizens and over the 15 million visitors that visit us every year. It makes no sense for us to be fighting our government in a time we should all be fighting together. And so we're going to make sure we stay on this fight. And we want people to support those in Georgia, support your cities, support your mayors. This might get a little ugly, but in the end, we have to be about the lives of people. And we know that strong people build strong businesses.
All right.
Which builds us.
Mayor Johnson, we certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Always a pleasure, my brother.
All right, folks. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren and Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley sent a letter to the Department of Health and Human Services, the Secretary, Alex Azar, requesting a report detailing the Trump administration's response to racial health disparities exacerbated by the COVID-19 outbreak. The letter reads in part, "We write to you today because the coronavirus disease, a 2019 COVID-19 pandemic, has laid bare the deepest and most entrenched chronic public health crisis plaguing our country, systemic racism. The unjust reality that Black, brown, and indigenous communities have been disproportionately infected and killed by COVID-19 underscores that racism, discrimination, and bias are public health problems that the federal government must prioritize," and lays out other things in there. Now, here's the deal, okay? The Department of Health and Human Services is required by law to report biannually to Congress on its progress to address health disparities, but these reports appear to have stopped under the Trump administration. Reese, they literally are obligated and they're like, what the hell, we're not going to release him. We don't care. So when I hear Paris Jennard, and when I hear Brandon Tatum, and I hear crazy Candace Owens, and I hear all these black folks talking about how Trump, he's down with black people, Kanye, here they are required, and they won't even do this. They don't give a damn about black lives.
Absolutely not. But more disturbing is that this basically demonstrates how Donald Trump's administration is an autocracy. Today, the CDC stopped publishing hospitalization data. And, Donald Trump has had an attack on the CDC and their ability, actually demanding that data skip the CDC. And I believe it's go to the HHS. So Donald Trump is not a person who believes in transparency. Donald Trump is not a person who believes in the rule of law. And Donald Trump is not a person who has any concern. As a matter of fact, I think that the disproportionate impact on Black and brown people is actually a feature, not a bug, of coronavirus for Donald Trump. And I will not steal Erica's line, because she reminds us this every week. But what more could you expect from a white nationalist president?
I mean, Erica, this is it's idiotic. And again, another day reinforces the hashtag we tried to tell you. These folks don't care about black people, and the black people who say they're down with Trump are absolutely idiotic.
They certainly are, but I want to say to Reese, listen, sis, we got to keep that rolling. Whoever says it, that Donald Trump is the son of a Klansman. That is period, point blank. And when we think about, Reese brought forward how the data is no longer being remitted to the CDC, it is going directly to the White House. It is actually not to the White House, but it's skipping the CDC. It is now actively being remitted to a CIA-backed company, Palantir, which it was co-founded, or founded rather, by a Trump ally, a former California Trump delegate, a former Trump speaker from the 2016 RNC convention, someone who is worth $2.5 billion, by the name of Peter Thiel, who made his presence known in the White House several times. And the last time, about 11 months ago, said to Donald Trump and those people that he was flanked by, that there needs to be an investigation launched into Google. So these are the types of people that Donald Trump listens to, and that now hospitals are now being provided a link to remit HIPAA information to a firm, a company, which was started back in the 9/11 days by someone who got this name from the Lord of the Rings. And that name Palantir specifically means being able to look at the whole world at any given time. It's really a throwback to Furious 7. Anybody familiar with the Fast and Furious, the 7th series, God's Eye, if you can remember that back in 2015. So there is a God's Eye that has been developed by this secret company that's supposed to be coming public. I don't know if their IPO has been published just yet. But when we think about, as Reese talked about, this autocracy, when we think about who this person is and the conspiracy theories that he throws out, but then also who he is flanked by in his regime, this election that people are voting around is less than about waxing poetic about who the candidate is, but this is about firing not only Donald, but it is about firing that entire regime, which is corrupt on his face. Think about hospital data. It's supposed to be specific to COVID data, but race, everything that Representative Ayanna Pressley has argued for, that data is effectively being given to a civilian company, which has gotten contracts from HHS north of $30 million, and that's just from HHS.
Greg, bottom line is here. They keep doing what they're doing. They flout the law. They don't care. They don't care about Congress. They don't care about anything else. This is why I keep saying hashtag fire Trump in November. The so-called law and order administration doesn't give a damn about the law. This is what happens when you're the thug in chief.
No, it's true, Roland. And, in concert with what Reese and Erica have already laid out for us, I think we are, as Dr. Strange told them in Avengers, we're in the end game now. Everything that Donald Trump is doing and the clavering that is around him is doing is targeted with one goal in mind: winning Trump re-election in November. Brian Kemp is a criminal. He's a white nationalist. And as far as I'm concerned, he's a murderer. he is a potential murderer. And it seems to me that what the opposition has to do in this country, wherever it comes from, is use the same tactics. See, you're right. They don't respect the rule of law, but the rule of law really hasn't been tested. Even when they ignored subpoenas in the federal legislature, instead of going immediately to court and letting these things work through the system to reveal whoever else is with them, the Democrats decide, well, we're not going to do that because, we're looking at elections too. Okay, damn that. You've got lawsuits in North Carolina, Arizona, California, even Texas before Abbott came out with the policy, trying to sue governors to stop people who were trying to make people wear masks. We just heard Doug Jones say Kay Ivey just issued a mandatory mask rule right in neighboring Alabama, so it can be done. But who on the Democratic side will sue this illegitimate so-called Governor Kemp, damn white nationalist, election-stealing former Secretary of State, gearing up to induce this panic to suppress the vote in November? Who will sue him for threatening the lives of black and brown people? In other words, what has to happen, I think, is that now the opposition to these white nationalists have to press on all fronts. Our sister Tamika Mallory, our sister Linda Sarsour are willing to put their bodies on the line. And now, what are these people who work as lawyers for a living willing to do when it comes to attacking them legally? Finally, there's a macabre logic to this. The macabre logic is very simple. They want to induce panic. They want to hijack the November election by either stopping the November election or having this country in such a frenzy, in such a collapsed state that the election will be illegitimate. So this isn't as crazy as just an individual who has clearly lost his mind, as his niece has shown us. And by the way, her book sold 950,000 copies today, the largest number on record. It isn't just about him losing his mind. This is a deliberate strategy to induce and maintain fear and panic in this country so they can steal this election and finish the job of their rallying cry, which is to have white supremacy for 4 more years in this country.
And just so you understand when I talk about what they're doing, go to my iPad, please. This was yesterday. Abby Phillip of CNN, she tweeted, Trump now explicitly warning that fair housing regulations designed to combat housing segregation will obliterate the suburbs. Your home will go down in value and crime rates will rapidly rise, Trump said today. Y'all, that is a white nationalist speaking to white people saying, you better re-elect me or they are going to take over. A sculpture of a Black Lives Matter protester in Bristol, England, which replaced a statue of a slave trader, was removed by local authorities. British artist Mark Quinn sculpted the statue of activist Jen Reid. Guys, roll the video, please. Sculpted the statue of activist Jen Reid weeks after protesters tore down the statue of slave trader Edward Colston. The display of the statue was set up without permission of Bristol's council. It lasted 1 day before it was taken down and moved to a museum. Well, guess what? I like to see that sort of insurrection. Folks, yesterday, the Twitter accounts of major companies and individuals were compromised in one of the most widespread hacks the platform has ever seen, all promoting a Bitcoin scam that appears to be earning its creators large sums of money. The accounts affected include President Barack Obama, Vice President Joe Biden, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Kanye West, Michael Bloomberg, and Apple. Joining me right now to talk about this is Shireen Mitchell. She's a social media analyst and diversity strategist. She really tracks a lot of these sort of crypto type dramas going on and what's happening in the whole tech world. Shireen, how major is this?
It's a big deal. When we look at the way in which this was impacted across the board, we have not only a crypto breach, we have a Bitcoin breach, but we also have a data and privacy breach. And the reason that this is actually a big deal is because everybody who was blue checked is verified and have their own private data connected to this as well. So this is not a small deal, and this is not going anywhere. And ultimately, it's going to have to be investigated, and we'll see that happen.
And we talk about, so tell people what actually happened. Did they take over complete control of their accounts, meaning they had access to their tweets, their direct messages, everything?
Yes, everything that's connected to their accounts, because the way in which this hack happened, it was internal. This was a root hack. This is not like someone just hacking one account at a time. This was a system hack, and that changes everything when it comes to what happens and how much information is there and what can be done. It was also said that this, that someone from within Twitter actually, was breached as a person, an individual who gave over this information. So that also tells you that the company itself has employees that they have to worry about. And this is not uncommon for us to be thinking about, because we've had multiple aspects and issues when it comes to disgruntled employees and what they have access to and what they will do in terms of damage within the company as well. So this, what people don't understand is that this was one of those breaches that this came from inside the house. This was not just an external breach.
And we were talking about that data. I mean, they by controlling the accounts, they literally could have downloaded all of those direct messages. Now, as you said, whatever private information you had connected to your account, they now can be able to access.
Yes, they have that information because, and if you understand this correctly, the blue checks seems to be connected to a completely separate console than the regular accounts. So that means that there's a system that's locked in and keyed in to blue check marked individuals. So all your data and all your information is in one solid place, and that's what they targeted. And excuse me, and I just want to make sure that we're clear about this. This could have also been a revenge attack. Because, if in 2016, when Twitter basically removed all the blue checks and all the ones who were targeting people during the 2016 election, they waited to after the election to do that. And so you see a lot of people who are mad about getting their blue checks removed and those that were being removed from the platforms. So we don't know if we're still finding out more details of this, but the fact that blue checks were targeted, that's a message for us about the future, especially with the elections as well moving forward.
Well, yeah, and that's something that, again, folks had really been paying attention to and understand, which is one of the reasons why they keep telling people constantly change your passwords, use the two-step authentication, so if anybody sort of gets access it will automatically send you a text message or email or whatever system you set up so you are fully aware.
But let's just understand, some of these accounts actually had two-factor authorization on their accounts. So the problem with this was that because it was root, because it came from within the system, they were able to bypass a lot of those. And some people are still locked out of their accounts because they did systematic changes of emails and other data points within the system. So even with in this moment, because it came from inside the house, a lot of those systems would not work. So I would say the examples that probably protected people are people who probably didn't use text as they're too off. Those that use the application, the authorization application, where you had to go to a second application to get access to your account, those people probably were protected. But we saw that ultimately what they were able to do was just shut down all the blue check accounts, keep people from being able to tweet. They could actually retweet, but some people still lost their accounts. So I still see blue check people who have been locked out of their accounts and can't get back in.
Again, this is the world that we're now living in. Folks have better be prepared for these sort of things. And so, Shireen Mitchell, we sure appreciate you being on top of this.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot. All right, folks, let's if y'all want to talk about what's madness, it's what's happening with one of the most venerable media institutions that we've ever seen, Ebony magazine. So I got a text today. So I told y'all yesterday that the group that says they own Ebony hires Willie Gary, the attorney, to send a letter to the company that now controls the debt, saying, look, you guys made these statements. We're in control of the company. You should not have made these statements. It was, all sorts of different things, also different things that, again, you're sort of like, okay, what's really going on here? What's interesting about this whole deal is that, and I have a copy of the actual letter. Here's what they say in this letter right here, okay? In this letter that was sent from Willie Gary, representing Robert Shoemake, as well as Willa Jackson, who say they own Ebony magazine. It says, it has been approximately 3 years since Parkview have controlled the company's financial affairs, and Ebony has continued to plunge into financial crisis and is now in arrears on its debts, with Parkview in approximately $1.5 million, as well as other obligations, including vendors and advertisers owing approximately $2 million in advertiser credit and $2 million in payroll taxes. Also, when you decided to make yourself the chairman of Ebony to take over the company's financial affairs so it would perform on its debt obligations, Blueprint's relationship with Ebony was no longer kept at arm's length and created a conflict of interest. Now, Blueprint is the black-owned asset company that took over Parkview's debts, okay? So I got to explain to you what's going on here. The guys who bought Ebony, excuse me, were loaned the money from Blueprint. Now watch this. The Ebony folks have responded to Willie Gary's letter. This is their response. We, the board of Ebony Media Holdings, are in receipt of your correspondence dated July 14th. While we recognize that your firm has limited background and access to authentic documentation, we feel it is entirely irresponsible to make allegations of illegal and unethical conduct without reviewing the basic operating documents of the company. We would like to bring this matter to an expeditious close and save you and your client valuable time and financial resources and the negative attention that will be brought to a set of conspired actions that remain the subject of an ongoing investigation. So then they detail in here all of the rules, exactly what should happen, things along those lines. Then they say in here, we further draw your attention to a cease and desist letter dated March 20th, 2020 that was delivered to Mr. Shoemake and signed by Mr. Jackson. Again, we draw your attention to a second cease and desist letter dated June 26, 2020. And it says the continued unauthorized conduct of Shoemake is likely to cause confusion, mistake, or deception as to Shoemake's affiliation, connection, and or associate with Ebony. It may appear that Ebony authorized Shoemake to conduct such Ebony activities or that Ebony endorses the fraudulent conduct. Please note that the misuse of the Ebony trademark, including the solicitation and collection of charitable donations on behalf of Ebony without consent, constitutes trademark infringement. Now, here's what's interesting. In the letter from Willie Gary to Jacob Waltauer with Blueprint, they assert that Robert Shoemake owns 49% of the company. They responded by saying, well, wait a minute, what about all these cease and desist letters? They go through all of this information in here. They lay all of these things out in terms of various transactions, things that they've done, and they just lay this entire response out. This actually happened today. So that group, Willa Jackson, Robert Shoemake, posted this on the Ebony website. Ebony ownership immediately removes Jacob Waltauer as chairman with cause, citing the letter saying that Ebony ownership grew concerned when Waltauer began to book media appearances and shared confidential information with outlets like the Wall Street Journal. Well, I talked to the folks at Blueprint, and they said this comes down. This is absolutely nuts. So here's what you have going on right here, folks. You have the group, Willa Jackson, Michael Gibson, CVG, who acquired the assets of Ebony. They used money that was given to them from Parkview. Parkview now had their debt taken over by Blueprint. Blueprint does an investigation, and they're saying this is crazy. They oust Willa Jackson as chairman CEO. Now you have Willa Jackson and Robert Shoemake saying, no, Robert Shoemake owns 49%. That was sold to him. Blueprint is saying that deal didn't even exist. It's not even real because it wasn't even properly approved. Massive drama. Here's where we stand, what we don't have, what we have right now, Greg Carr. There's no Ebony magazine. They haven't printed an edition in months. You've got a website that's pretty much defunct. Social media that's defunct. So here you have this historic brand. All of the things that it's done over the decades, right now, that's wrapped up into a huge, absolute mess.
Well, brother, as someone who has written for Ebony magazine, and when I was offered payment, I declined because I said it was more important for me personally to be able to say and to tell my mother and to tell my community that I wrote about the National Museum of African American History. I wrote about the Black Panther Party. I wrote in the print edition. And my name will appear in the same magazine that LaRon Bennett Jr. wrote in. It's more important for me, but I also understand that there are other people who needed that little bit of money who never got paid. And I guess what I'm saying is, listening to you walk us through that, the thing that gives me hope is that when the smoke clears, the thing that still exists is that decades of archive and momentum that form the core of why Ebony and Johnson Publications have meant so much to us. The work of LaRon Bennett, the Black women's issue, the Black vote issues, the annual discussions of what is most important in Black America, and Jet and Ebony and Negro Digest and Black World. And this will be sorted out. We know courts of law there is. As long as the assets of Ebony are not dispersed, and I mean the intellectual capital, then like a phoenix, it can rise. And I mean, it's discouraging, but I have some faith that Ebony will rise again.
Well, the intellectual capital, Reese, that's there, it's really the paper edition of the magazine. So what CBG did not acquire, the photographs, that of course was sold to a group of foundations that will be provided to the Smithsonian, the African American History Museum. So they do have those paper editions and all of that. The problem here is this here. Here you are operating right now in this mode, almost 9 weeks after George Floyd's death. Black Lives Matter, this renewed interest, this heightened interest. And here you have one of our most historic media outlets that is in a coma. It was already in trouble. It was already in ICU. It's now in a coma. And I got experience with this in that when I had run Chicago Defender. And look, trying to save that whole deal and all the drama there, and it was a mess. We did revive it. They went back to the whole deal, and they no longer print a publication. You barely have anything on their website. So yeah, technically it's still there, but it's not there. This is what I'm talking about when we have to be able to take care of these institutions and not allow them to wither on the vine, which means you got to have folks running them who know what the hell they're doing.
Right, Roland. And what's disappointing from the way that you've laid it out is that we're talking about a Black investment firm that took it over. And sometimes, unfortunately, it sounds like, not all Black investment firms have the intention of preserving our cultural institutions, or perhaps the intention is to preserve it, but the impact is that it actually worsens the condition because they don't have the experience in actually cultivating it and getting it out of the issues that it faces right now. I applaud you, Dr. Carr, for having that reverence for this institution. And as you pointed out, Roland, it is a great loss right now. And the fact of the matter is Black print media is really withering to a degree in a time where we really need it most. And yes, a lot of things are moving to digital, but we still need that historic trove of data and institutional knowledge to provide that perspective that even I will admit, somebody like me, I don't have that treasure trove of information like what Dr. Carr has. And so I hope that they come to an agreement that actually preserves this institution and that the right people are put in charge of Ebony that can actually revive it.
Erica?
Yeah, I agree. And definitely for Dr. Carr to have penned in a publication that I grew up on, Ebony and Jet, it was not uncommon for me to be sitting and getting my hair hot combed by my mom, which was always a fight, but to be thumbing through the pages of one of those Black publications. And what always spoke to me was be able to see people who spoke and wrote with such power and to see visuals that reflected who I was when we're talking about living in an environment that does not celebrate, but definitely appropriates Black culture on a regular. And so I really, really hope that, even though we're moving to more and more of a digital environment, I am one who likes to hold my magazines. I like to read my books, and I like to have it in hand, that there will be a reestablishment, because you pointed this out, Roland, just bringing BET into this conversation very quickly, that on the heels of George Floyd being lynched and all of these different very pertinent Black issues that are larger societal issues, that we did not have a BET that did actually capture the video. It was Roland Martin Unfiltered that captured video and kept us engrossed in these types of conversations. So when we look around us to see images and hear voices that echo us, it is important to have an Ebony and all of these different publications that have been important in our community for decades still alive.
So let me also give our folks this here. You might recall the crowdfunding campaign by 420 Real Estate, which was the cannabis crowdfunding campaign. A number of you may have donated to that. Well, that was actually a crowdfunding campaign that was owned by Willard Jackson. Robert Shoemaker was involved with it. They came to us to advertise on our platform for that. A number of you have sent emails saying you have not gotten information with regards to that. I reached out directly to Robert Shoemaker and Willard Jackson about this, saying you owe my viewers answers as to what is going on with their investment. Robert Shoemaker responded with this phone number, which is 678-701-8317. He said to me that they have a call center set up to take these various questions. Now, you can call that particular number right there. So one, I want folks to be able to do that. But I also want you, and I got this letter here. I got a letter that from one of the folks who watched the show, and he said he had no problem at all using his name. His name is J. Mandel Carter. And he filed an SEC complaint with regards to 420 Real Estate, their crowdfunding campaign. He's now sent a letter to 420 Real Estate, to Willard Jackson, Robert Shoemaker, demanding a request for refund, citing lost profits. And so, again, if you have any questions regarding that crowdfunding campaign, remember, they were an advertiser. They are responsible for those issues. That also is a part of this. In that response from Jacob Waltower to Willie Gary, to Willard Jackson and Robert Shoemaker, he talked about 420 Real Estate and payments being made. So again, if you invested in that crowdfund campaign of 420 Real Estate, you should call this number 678-701-8317, 678-701-8317. Robert Shoemaker said that they have a call center set up to discuss these things. They should be able to answer your questions. And if you don't get any questions answered, certainly send us an email and we'll keep asking those questions. And just so y'all know, they had not made payment on our advertising deal, and I stopped doing those crowdfund live reads and began to ask them a series of questions, demanding answers, saying you owe my followers who gave money answers as to what's going on with those funds. And so I have been asking those questions for several months. I've made it perfectly clear to Robert Shoemaker and to Willard Jackson. I will continue to ask those questions and to get those answers. I said because y'all are black. This was a partnership with Ebony. And I said, and guess what? If you taking funds from black people, I expect answers to black people, because we don't play those games at all. And so I made that clear to Robert Shoemaker and Willard Jackson. That's also a part of this whole Ebony thing as well. And so I have been in communication with Jacob Waltower. I have been in communication with Willard Jackson. I've been in communication with Robert Shoemaker and all the folks involved. I established a very long email chain beginning May 1st, asking a series of questions, and I fully expect those to be answered and for y'all to be properly taken care of. So don't think for a second we're not paying any attention to these issues. And so the more answers we get, we'll deliver those answers to you. Willard Jackson had asked yesterday to come onto the show today, and then his lawyers advised not, but he did say he will come on the show next week. And so I look forward to asking Willard all of these questions about all of this drama surrounding Ebony and the 420 crowdfunding, 420 real estate crowdfunding as well. And so we'll see if that happens. Speaking of drama, we told you yesterday that Nick Cannon was removed from Viacom CBS over a podcast that he did with Professor Griff, formerly of Public Enemy, where he was accused of making anti-Semitic remarks. Well, yesterday, in a series post, Nick Cannon apologized, and this is what he said. First and foremost, I extend my deepest and most sincere apologies to my Jewish sisters and brothers for the hurtful and divisive words that came out of my mouth during my interview with Richard Griffin. They reinforce the worst stereotypes of a proud and magnificent people, and I feel ashamed of the uninformed and naive place that these words came from. The video of this interview has since been removed. While the Jewish experience encompasses more than 5,000 years and there is so much I have yet to learn, I have had at least a minor history lesson over the past few days, and to say that is eye-opening would be a vast understatement. As a result, I want to express my gratitude to the rabbis, community leaders, and institutions who reach out to me to help enlighten me instead of chastising me. I want to assure my Jewish friends, new and old, that this is only the beginning of my education. I am committed to deeper connections, more profound learning, and strengthening the bond between our two cultures today and every day going forward. Now, he also said this here. I just had the blessed opportunity to converse with Rabbi Abraham Cooper, Director of Global Social Action, the Simon Wiesenthal Center. My first words to my brother was, I apologize for the hurt I caused the Jewish community. On my podcast, I use words and reference literature I assume to be factual to uplift my community instead turn out to be hateful propaganda and stereotypical rhetoric that pain another community. For this, I am deeply sorry, but now together we can write a new chapter of healing. As a result of this, the folks at Fox announced that he will continue to be the host and executive producer of the show The Masked Singer. I want to go to our panel now. Greg Carr, of course, he graduated just this spring from Howard University. What do you make of all of this? What he released on Monday, which then led to Viacom CBS firing him on Tuesday, was totally different from the tone of the tweets last night.
Well, Nick is smarter than any of the people who are lined up against him. And I say that in this particular sense because, you know, one thing I know to be true about Nick Cannon is that he comes out of black community. He's going to stand with black community. And he's an honest guy, and he's always very, very, very thoughtful in how he moves. And as far as Cannon's class is concerned, that's something Nick really created. He actually birthed it while he was a student at Howard. I was on the first Cannon's class and have been on several since. It was a conduit to bring people into conversation around books and ideas. And if you know anything about Nick, he talks to every and anybody, and he's the same guy all the time. He's like you. I mean, you see him, that's who you see. I think Viacom reacted as the result of Deshaun Jackson and Steven Jackson and Ice Cube, so somebody had to pay. And I think they overreacted because one thing about Nick, he's going to smile, he's going to laugh. I've never seen him angry, but one thing's for sure. He's a businessman. So, yeah, they punched him in the mouth. But guess what? Now he wants his intellectual property. And whether he gets it or not, they can keep the name Wildin' Out. And they had a 25-year relationship with this man. At the same time, what they can't keep is the thing that keeps Nick Cannon centered. And that's who he is. I expect there to be continuing unfolding of this story. I expect Viacom to either try to walk something back or do some back channel negotiation with him. I don't know that he would go back into any form of relationship, but I know when Diddy offered him to come over to Revolt, he hadn't said anything about that. I know that Fox is going to continue with The Masked Singer. I know that he's supposed to be debuting a talk show in the fall. And I know one thing, never bet against somebody who values themselves beyond any context. And we can talk about all that anti-Semitism stuff another time because, you know, people are calling stuff hotepery. Anybody says hotep, I probably at the moment they say that, I mute them in my mind because I know that they don't know enough about the conversation to continue the conversation intelligently. Well, and Greg, we can talk about that another time.
Well, Greg, on that point, I mean, people who were criticizing him were blasting that very thing. And so you just said it. So when you hear people condemn Hotep and consider it to be some far nutcase sort of deal that obviously we discussed this before, doesn't sit well with you.
Well, no, I mean, it doesn't sit well or not sit well with me. I don't take them seriously because they don't know enough to have an intelligent conversation. There are two dimensions to the question of Black-Jewish relationships in the modern era. One of them is the cultural question. And that's really when they say Hotep, I think that's what they're talking about. Although they don't know what Hotep means, I could write it in glyphs on their forehead and they wouldn't be able to translate it. But they're using that as a label for the idea of a stew of conspiracy theories and off history. They don't know enough history to talk about whether it's off or not. And what you saw with that exchange with Professor Griff, Nick was talking about books that Griff had written, and then he's dropping in things from what he had read, which a lot of that is street literature. And there's a real conversation to be had as to why that literature exists. So if you watch the whole Candace class, you can see him trying to weave in and out of that, but then he introduces some other conversations that speak to that street literature. The people who are saying, oh, that's hotel, are really talking about that type of literature that has existed outside of the university, but inside the university, there's no real debate about the origins of the Abrahamic faith traditions. They all come out of Northeast Africa, beginning with Judaism, and Jews are not white initially. But that gets conflated into another kind of conversation, and that's the second category. The second category is the political category of people in white nationalist societies trying to avoid last place. If we understand the history of Judaism, we understand that Jews have been persecuted for centuries. And most of that persecution in the United States has come from white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, the biggest anti-Semite in American history. There's one candidate we could name. His name would be Henry Ford, who wrote a whole 3 volumes called The International Jew, the world's foremost problems. Jews had to fight like a number of white ethnics in this country to battle their way into whiteness at the risk of persecution. The Klan didn't like the Jews, the Klan didn't like the Catholics, and the Klan didn't like the blacks. So what you have then is coalition politics, which forms between white ethnics and black folk at key moments. Harold Cruz writes about it in his book, Plural but Equal. But what you also have is tensions that emerge as well. Because ultimately, for example, when you have some of the Jewish organizations take the opposite side against black people in the Baki case in the 1970s, as Jews become more assimilated into white culture, you have this negotiation with the blacks who get left behind. That's the source of tensions. It's too sophisticated to be carried out in an hour in Cannon's class when Nick is talking about to somebody who's basically come out of those communities trying to puzzle through that. But I'll tell you one thing about Nick Cannon. If he lives, every word he tweeted and said in that apology, he's going to stick by it. You know who he's going to invite to that Cannon's class table? He's going to invite all the rabbis. He's going to invite the scholars. He's going to read every word of every book anybody tell him to read. And what will emerge out of this is the real culprit. And the real culprit in this, as far as I'm concerned, Viacom and everybody else, are these corporations that don't like any Negro to get too uppity and have too much power. And you got to bring them out in the yard and try to cut their foot off in front of everybody else before anybody else get any ideas about being independent.
These were tweets he also posted today. Let me read those. Folks, pull those up. He said, morning radio family, I've decided to take some time away from my radio show so I can commit myself to deeper, more thorough reflection and education. I will use this time to establish an action plan towards real impactful change and advocacy aimed at bringing people together. I continue to express my gratitude to the rabbis, community leaders, and institutions who have reached out to me to help enlighten me. Their input and friendship will help me as I further commit myself to more profound learning and towards strengthening the bond between the Black and Jewish cultures every day going forward. Erica, your thoughts?
Yeah, I pretty much saw that this was the way that this kind of was the direction that the tweets were going to go in. But I just, when I started kind of like looking back on everything that had kind of happened, it was amazing to me that this was a podcast that had been living since June 30. And so just looking at how this, took fire in this present day and the way that Nick has really handled this, taking a break away from his morning radio show, saying that, as Dr. Carr has just said, he's going to take time and sit with all of those people that he's going to begin to build action plans with. As somebody who is a businessman, somebody who has really kind of shown the way how to move throughout, having been a child actor and developed programming, I'm really going to be watching and to see the other side, how Nick is going to move and matriculate through this. And I think that that's going to be very interesting to see. One last thing that I would add is that, we are in a country that has built its assets off of being anti-Black. And so while anti-Semitism is definitely something that, all of us should really denounce, that we also have to be very, very conscious of the movement in the moment that we're in right now. And that is to move and push forward away from anti-Black acts that we continue to see surface throughout this nation.
Reese, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar wrote a piece in The Hollywood Reporter where he took to task African Americans over anti-Semitism. He wrote this piece, "Where is the outrage over anti-Semitism in sports in Hollywood?" He talked about Ice Cube. He talked about Deshaun Jackson, and any number of things. He basically is challenging, African Americans on this very issue, and again, Hollywood as well. And then he says, yes, some of the above have apologized. Deshaun Jackson, Steven Jackson, Chelsea Handler, while others continue to defiantly marinate in their own prejudice. Their arrogant and irrational response to accusations of anti-Semitism, rather than dissuade us, actually confirm people's worst opinions. Ice Cube's response was remorseless. What if I was just pro-black? This is the true brother. I didn't lie on anyone. I didn't say I was anti-anybody. Don't believe the hype. I've been telling my truth. Jabbar writes, his truth was clearly anti-Semitic, but like Trump, he believes his truth exists outside facts.
Yeah, so, I don't proclaim to be sophisticated enough, as Dr. Carr expertly laid out. It's a far more complicated subject than to discuss in sound bites. But I think to what I will say to Nick Cannon's statements, I do applaud him. By his own admission, I'm just going to say what he said. He called himself ignorant. And one of the things I appreciate about his statement is that he is not going to die on that hill. And I think that a big problem that we have in our society is what I call belligerently ignorant people. People who have this complete adherence to misinformation, to disinformation, to ill-informed opinions, and they are just completely belligerent about it and unwilling to yield to new information. And I think that what Nick Cannon did, people might question his sincerity in that, and I think that's on them to draw that conclusion or not. But I do applaud that he said, listen, when presented with new information, I don't want to continue to perpetuate these statements that I made. I want to learn. I want to invite people into this conversation. I want to take a step away. And I think if more people did that, we would all be better off for it, because I get in arguments with belligerently ignorant people all day, every day. So if there's somebody who's willing to say I was misinformed, or however you want to characterize it, I was ignorant as he characterized it, then more power to them.
Greg, this is what in the final paragraph of Jabbar, he says, the lesson never changes. So why is it so hard for some people to learn? No one is free until everyone is free. As Martin Luther King Jr. explained, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. So let's act like it. If we're going to be outraged by injustice, let's be outraged by injustice against anyone. This back and forth is not new. Recently, of course, Fox Soul, when they announced they were not going to carry the speech on July 4th of Nation of Islam minister Louis Farrakhan, he writes in there how Chelsea Handler, she had posted a video of Louis Farrakhan denouncing white supremacy. And she defended it. And she said he was speaking truth. That people criticized her, and then after several days, she finally took it down. There were people who actually were upset with Cornel West was on this show, and when he addressed the issue of Farrakhan speaking about Hitler, and people were like, "Oh, Cornel West is wrong as well." Just Greg, this thing that keeps cropping up, where anti-Semitic, no, I'm not. We're black, we're Semitic, so therefore we can't be anti-Semitic. And there's sort of this whole back and forth. And as Cornel West said, he said, I agree with Minister Farrakhan because he preaches against white supremacy, but I disagree with other stuff. But then there are people who say, wait a minute, you can't do that. You can't agree with some of what he says and disagree with others. Folks who say David Duke is no different than Louis Farrakhan. All of these different things, they continue to crop up. Just your assessment.
Very quickly, I think, Reese, what you said is absolutely correct. We're talking about whether people have information or not, whether they know or not. You know, I have an immense amount of respect for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He wasn't just an athlete. He is an intellectual. He's a writer. And when he was a teenager in New York City, going to Power Memorial High School, when he was still Lou Alcindor, he attended a summer program, the Harry You Act, which was taught in part by John Henry Clark, one of his heroes. John Henry Clark was called an anti-Semite from the pages of the New York Times by Henry Louis Gates in an article called Black Demagogues and Pseudo Scholars, where he tried to say all these black scholars who are reaching these black people in the streets Some of them are anti-Semitic because they make claims about the nature of the Jewish religion and where black people come from and what blacks are the original Jews and the Beta Israels and whether or not black people can be anti-Semitic. Let's be very clear. Anybody who is standing in the way of somebody else's human rights is in violation. We don't care. And let's also be very clear. A number of Jews very prominent in not only the civil rights, black power, liberation movements. So we can't use these categories to beat up whole groups of people. Let's also be very clear. Muhammad Ali, when he came out and became Muhammad Ali and not Cassius Clay, who influenced, among others, Lew Alcindor to become Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, has also been accused of anti-Semitism because he was in the Nation of Islam. Let's also be very clear that these conversations, as Reese said, we can't have these conversations without nuance and without information. So Kareem is absolutely right when he says we can't have intolerance, but he can't say that outside of a historical context that has found him often on the opposite side of white opinion. And in this country, whether you be Jew or Gentile, whether you be Catholic or Protestant, whether you be Muslim or Christian, the politics of this country revolve around, and that is what this is about. This is about race. Finally, I will say this. If we're going to have an intelligent conversation going forward, we have to, and I think this is what Nick is doing, as he said, whether we gauge the sincerity of his apology or not. And I, for one, individually will not gauge the sincerity because I believe he's being absolutely sincere. We must first confess our innocence. People who talk with such cocksure surety about issues like this are usually the least informed people in the room.
Come on.
All right, now I got to go here, y'all. I was going to go to this other story, but I just saw this. This is absolutely hilarious. Do y'all remember a little tweet Chuck Woolery sent out? 2 and 2 Chuck.
Stop
Y'all remember this tweet right here? The most outrageous lies are the ones about COVID-19. Everyone is lying. The CDC, media, Democrats, our doctors, not all but most, that we are told to trust. I think it's all about the election and keeping the economy from coming back, which is about the election. I'm sick of it. That was on July 12th. Do y'all know what has happened?
Oh, yes, Roland. Please grace us.
Do y'all know what has happened in the 4 days since that tweet went out?
COVID.
Y'all go to my iPad. Chuck Woolery changes stance on COVID-19 lies after son tests positive. The son of Chuck Woolery has tested positive. This was the tweet that he sent out July 13th. To further clarify and add perspective, COVID-19 is real and it is here. My son tested positive for the virus, and I feel for those suffering and especially for those who have lost loved ones. Reese, he's since deleted his Twitter account.
As he should. And I think that this is a huge reason why we see the response to COVID being so drastically different between white people, black people, Latino people, because so few white people have actually experienced a person in their inner circle who have contracted COVID. So for them, this is something that they're seeing on Fox News, and that their president is calling a hoax. And yet for at least 30% of black people, according to latest polling, have experienced a person close to them who has contracted this. And so it's not real to them. And unfortunately, it should be real enough because there are 3.5 million people, I believe now, who are infected with COVID just in this country, 138,000 people who have died. Just the empathy for your fellow citizen should be enough for it to be real to you. But unfortunately, for many white people, particularly people who follow Donald Trump, it doesn't count until it hits right at their back door or front door.
Well, was it so interesting here, Erica? His son got it, deleted the tweet. And remember, Donald Trump had sent that tweet out, got retweeted 36,000 times. He amplified it. Oh, ain't it amazing when some stuff come knocking on your door?
It hits different, Roland. It hits real different when it's right there. And that does not take away from the severity of COVID. As Reese talked about, you're talking about 30% of a whole demographic that have been touched by COVID. But because of the invisibility belief of white people that they have largely said, well, hey, we're not the ones that get it. So it's the blacks and the browns. They're the ones that's getting it and transmitting it and dying. So we are going to live our best life. And that is quickly proven not to be a real thing. So, and when people really kind of become one with this truth, that wearing masks, as Dr. Carr just dawned for us the correct way, wearing a mask reduces transmissions, that a lot of the close family and friends that many of us have known that have succumbed to COVID, that they too, as their dear leader, as their son of a Klansman, mediocre orange one, says that their children must go off to school. And you're talking about thousands and thousands of children that may pass away because of COVID. We'll probably see that attitude change much in the same way it did when opioid hit the white community, even though it impacts the black community. Then their response to the 80s failed but success in building wealth for white folks, war on drugs.
Greg, I ain't trying to be petty.
Yes, you are. He had to stop and laugh. Look at him.
I ain't trying to be petty.
No, you're succeeding.
But I'm being petty. These white folks gonna learn. It's a dude in Florida, top official, adamant against masks. His ass in critical condition.
Yes, sir. Well, Roland, we know that these masks are to protect other people. Black folk, don't listen to these white nationalists. They're at the end. Wear your mask. Put your mask on. Protect your mama. Protect your grandmama and them. Because guess what? They're going to cough and laugh and sit at the bar and eat barbecue and drink and swim and go to the beach. And when they look up and this thing has flooded over them, all these black and brown women in these emergency rooms who are nurses and essential personnel, and like our dear new ancestor sister in Louisville were EMTs and all that. Look, now we got to clean up behind them. This country going to have to make a choice because there never was a country to begin with. It's a bunch of people living in the same landmass. Chuck Woolery and his friends, all your friends, y'all are pressing the gas down on the floorboards of a car that's engine is about to blow out. And so what we going to do is wear our masks, wash our hands, keep social distance, tell our young people to be careful. And when they talk about reopening the schools, we're going to organize and make sure that our children are safe and that the children of the teachers who are in there are also safe. And we are going to have to separate ourselves out from this foolishness. Because at this point, as old gospel song used to say, soon one morning, death come creeping up in the room. And when death come creeping up in the room, it's colorblind. So black folk don't get in these people's way. If they're going to be fools, let them dance on to the grave. But we do not follow them into the grave. Never have, never will.
I wasn't trying to be petty. But, see, Chuck might want to get you one of these here. See?
That's right, bro.
You know what I'm saying?
I like that one, though.
Well, I had to order one because I got to coordinate. So I had to get Texas A&M one.
John Witherspoon.
I had to coordinate. Yes, I had to coordinate. That's how we do these things. All right. Y'all know what time it is.
No charcoal grills are allowed.
I'm white. I got you, huh?
Illegally selling water without a permit
on my property.
Whoa! Hey!
You don't live here.
I'm uncomfortable.
Lord have mercy. The white manager at a Holiday Inn Express in Ohio closed its pool after a white family complained about having to share the area with a black family. The black family were paying guests of the hotel.
The children swim. Okay, so I'm confused. I'm done talking to you. I want a full refund because we're just going to leave your hotel. There's nothing else for us to talk about. I want my money back. So start the paperwork and give me my shit.
That's crazy. They locking up the pool because we're not. That's crazy. Y'all need.
Okay, tell your other customers there's room. He said 10 customers in the pool. It was only 5 kids in the pool. We were adults.
No, you were.
Come on.
Watching their kids.
Exactly.
Where of your shoes, Addie. Come on, come on. Oh, okay, come on.
We're not even in the pool. We're sitting outside the pool.
Huh?
So he said some people on 5 of the kids inside the pool. So 5 of the customers could wait for us down the pool, right? Yeah.
Y'all, come on out.
Last I checked, it's first come, first serve. Let me tell you something right there, Reese. If I was that sister, I would tell that manager, you can kiss my ass. Y'all keep swimming. We ain't going no damn where.
Absolutely. It's all about making Black people feel like they do not belong exactly where they have every right to be. They're paying customers, and the white manager just made the calculation that it's easier to push over these Black folks than it is to check these white people.
I'm not sure if he was white. He looked.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure what he was, but the bottom line is he was listening to them white folks right there. But my problem with that again is, it's first come, first serve. Yeah. If the pool is full when your ass show up, wait.
Exactly.
I mean, look, Erica. I remember going to the pool in my neighborhood when I was growing up. If it was packed, man, your ass waited till it cleared out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I just want to bring back up a point that I just said earlier. This country thrives off of anti-Blackness, and people that can get in that boat and try to assert some power that they feel like they need to assert, they do that. And for this sister to have to pack up what seemed to be a lot of children, and I'll just be honest. I mean, hotels and pools, unless it is my own, not going to be in it, but can understand that those are babies and they want some level of relief. But I would not stop there. I would sue Holiday Inn because what she actually, by management really standing with whoever was on the phone making a complaint from their own position of anonymity or, however that went through, that they actually made their guests people who in this climate, in this economy, chose to actually stay at their hotel. They should have to pay for that and more than just a refund. So I hope this sister actually goes for the whole corporation because they are getting a lot of money.
Greg, I'm telling you right now, if that was me, I would have channeled the great Della Reese.
Look, bro.
Are y'all slow in the control room? Go to my iPad, Lord, come on.
Thank you.
Poor Holiday.
Kiss my entire ass.
That
would have been my response, Greg.
Brother,
Kiss
I know
my
entire
ass.
It's interesting you say that because a contemporary of Della Reese's, a little bit older than her, but not much, Dorothy Dandridge. Remember when they drained that Las Vegas pool because Dorothy Dandridge stuck her toe in the pool? Some people might remember June 11, 1964, Martin Luther King and some of his people. In fact, they arrested Dr. King for trespassing at a motel in St. Augustine. And then Black and white people who had rented rooms in the motel jumped in the pool to desegregate the pool. And the manager of that hotel poured acid into the water. Erica's right. Pools have often been the site of white supremacy.
All right, Greg. All right, Greg froze. Let me know when he's unfrozen, because he wants to make that point.
He was about to get into it.
Yeah, he's about to go there.
We know. It was another sermon.
Y'all, what's up?
This is the
What's up?
sixth sermon.
What's up? All right, let's do this here. Y'all let me know when Greg reconnects. We can finish that point. I'm going to do this here. If y'all want to join our Bring the Funk fan club, we want y'all to do so. Please go to our Cash App, PayPal, Venmo. You can also mail it in. Of course, it's right there. New Vision Media, Inc., 1625 K Street Northwest, Suite 400, Washington, D.C., 2006. Let me know when y'all got Greg back. I'm going to read the names of folks who've given $50 or more who joined our Bring the Funk fan club. Let's get going. Aaron, Aisha Khalid Khan, Andrea Rogers, Andrina Broussard, Angela Roan, Anthony, April Chapman, Azuri Smith, Smith, Barry Howard, Beverly Singleton, Bianca Zachary, Brenda Hicks, Brian Sanders, Bryce Boss, Canute McKenzie, Carol's Kitchen and Desserts, Shantae, Charles Hill, Chris Craig, Cindy Harrison Odom, Connor Coughlin, Corey Benson, Dana Booker, Daniel LaRoche, Darius Horton, Darnell Williams, David Dennis, David Ings, Don Foster, Deanna Harris McCoy, Derek Onwauchi, Dexter Brown, Doc Sanchez, Douglas Roland, Emily Chafin, Felix Olabatui, Florence Jackson, Frederica Bro, Fernita Williams, George Gray, Guinevere Teague, Hayes Consulting, Herlon Pascal, Jadson Sansorin, Jeffrey Sanders, Jerome Hale, Johnny Jean, Jonathan Lomans, Karen DeCou, Kathy M., Kinley Warren, Kenneth Cozart, Kenneth McElrath, Katura Ladd, Kevin Wilder, Kevin Woods, LaCara Aduduro, Lawrence Crawford, Leonard Renfro, Linda Allen, Lolo Lawrence, Lonnie Weathersby, Lori Nicole, Luis Collier, Mahalia Johnson, Amadi L., Maria Reekston, Mark Clark, Mark Riles, Mark Roberts, Matthew Melvin, Maya Maxis Clemens, Michelle Arrington, Michelle Trufant, Michelle Minsk, Miriam Dries, Mia Farley, Nancy Carter, Nicole Walker, Norman Johnson, Onyemichi Opara, Arisha Hayes, Pamela Blaylock Carter, Pamela Shervington, Portia Bright, Project Broken Wings, Regina Umoya, Reginald Sanders Sr., Renee Matthews, Renessa White, Rhonda Hood, Robbie Pate, Robert Pico, Robert Young, Roderick, Ronnie Brown, Roosevelt Bradley, Rosonia, James Lindsay, Samuel Stowe, Sandra Frederick, Sharon McDowell, Sherry Collins, Stephanie Smith, Stephen Jones, Stephen Royal, Stephen Fogg, Tiara Dunson, Tori Mackey, Tracy Jones, Tracy Magnum, Troy Hale, Troy McDonald, Tyrone Woods, Veronica Freeman, WFB, Yoretta Robinson, Yetka Carlisle, Zakia Brown. Woo! All right, we got Greg back. Greg, finish that comment about the pools.
No, I'm just going to say right quick, man. I love that long list. It gets longer every week, don't it?
Hey, I got no problem with it.
Me neither, brother. No, I'm just going to say right quick that pools have been one of the biggest sites of white nationalist activity because water is intimate. In other words, when you're intimate like that, you say, if a black person touched this water and I touch this water, somehow whatever that black person is going to get on to or get into me. So, you know, it's been a site of battle that we haven't always studied or known. But we know that, as James Baldwin said, from birth to death, there's something very personal about being black in America. And seeing that sister and seeing those babies there, it touches you in a place that would make you say, as you said, brother, kiss my entire ass. And if they have some words to say about that, then you might have to lay hands on somebody. But water is an intimate thing. I think that's what triggers that visceral reaction from people.
Absolutely, absolutely. Folks, that's it for us today. Y'all, ain't no other show doing what we do in the way we do it. The panel we have, Erica, Greg, Reese, thank you so very much. When you look at the guests we had today, from Angela Peoples to Senator Doug Jones, Tamika Mallory, Mayor Van Johnson, Shireen Mitchell, breaking down the subjects dealing with Ebony Magazine and Nick Cannon. It was some other stuff we didn't even get to, y'all. Ain't nobody doing what we doing, and guess what? I love when these people put stuff on Twitter saying, oh my goodness, look at this, there are 3 black guests on CNN. I'm like, that's every day for Roland Martin Unfiltered. See, that's what happens. We don't have a problem finding black guests. We got a problem telling people no, because so many people are trying to come on the show. And so that's what I want y'all to understand, why you must support what we do. You can't sit here and talk that you want to support black if you don't support black. I told y'all, supportuntilfreedom.com. They're on the front lines out there protesting. We're using our capacity when it comes to media to amplify, elevate their stories. So you got to support this as well. So join our Bring the Funk fan club. We are getting closer to 10,000 members. Our goal is to have 20,000 by the end of the year. We're almost there. Y'all, we're doing amazing. We did 25 million views last month on Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope. And all them other people who've been bumping their gums, talking about their new media, match those numbers. Let's see who has brand new. That's all I'm saying.